about some things that contribute to a culture where people thrive and where business really succeeds as well. If you know me, if you've been hanging out with me on this channel, then you know that this is not my usual surrounds. I am in beautiful, sunny Sacramento, making some presentations to CEOs, business owners, presidents, and other C-suite folks for a bit of Vistage group here, or a few Vistage groups here in Sacramento, led by a wonderful Vistage chair, Bill Nemeat. Bill, thank you so much for your hospitality and having me come to talk about how we can have high-performing teams, even while perhaps we are or believe we are understaffed, which is, I know, a common problem right now. And I've been here now for 2 days. I've got one more day of these conversations with these business leaders to have, and we're talking about what it takes to create this high performing environment. And almost to a person, every single one of these executives, the first concern that they bring up is burnout. They're asking their people to do more with less. And some people, as they say, they're given 110%, and they are burning out. I am burning out. I'm concerned about burnout. Now, burnout is a real, true, important, meaningful concern that can drive people out of your company. It can drive all kinds of potential hazards. So I want to spend a few moments just looking into some of the things that can contribute to burnout, or things that can rescue you from the potential of burnout, rescue your people, things that you can do to rescue your people from the potential of burnout. And these things are counterintuitive, many of them. So today I'm going to address 3 of the things that people don't necessarily think of when they think about how can I spare my team from burning out. So that's what we're up to today. Now, the leaders that I was talking to, many of them were talking about needing to pare back on some of the challenge that they are bringing to their teams, some of the ways in which they're challenging their teams. And that is absolutely something that is worth looking at. It's also not necessarily the solution. If you pare back on challenge, for some people at some times, that may actually contribute to burnout. Now, what do I mean? How is that possible? Well, perhaps you've heard about the flow state, right? This is that state that psychologists, neuroscientists, the studiers of great performance, look at this thing called flow state, which is when you really get into a groove. Maybe you get a little zen, you get into that groove and you're working hard, you're working along, you lose track of time, and you feel really great about the work session when it's done. And what they've discovered, and I do not know where they come up with the numbers for these things, what they've discovered is that the flow state happens very often when people are stretched a little bit. They're stretched a little bit beyond their comfort zone. They're stretched a little bit beyond their capacity. They're asked or are asking from themselves that they do about 10% more, 10% beyond what they currently feel capable and comfortable doing. So you've probably experienced this too. If you're doing the same old, right? If you're doing the same shit different day, then you become bored. And what's counterintuitive here is that boredom of operating at 80%, or consistently even operating at 90, 95% of what you are capable of what you are capable of, then that sense of tedium can lead to burnout. Burnout is not just for the overworked. It's sometimes, often, a plague that infects and affects the underutilized. So if you're concerned about burnout on your team, maybe there are places in each person's workload, or maybe there are people who are being underutilized. And instead of paring back on the challenge, maybe pare back on the volume of work that you're asking them to do, and instead figure out ways to challenge them to bring them up into that 10%. Now, don't push it too far, because somewhere between 10 and 25%, people flip from being in that flow state to being overwhelmed, and being persistently and consistently overwhelmed. That is where we expect, where we know that burnout happens. So below 100% of utilization, below 100% of my capacity, I'm going to get burned out by boredom, underutilization, and not feeling challenged and grown. And then over 110 into like somewhere in that window between the sweet spot of 110% and 125%, I'm going to become burnt out again by being over challenged, overworked, not given a chance to catch my breath, by being overwhelmed. So there's number one of three things that I'm bringing to your attention today. There is a sweet spot of challenge. There is a sweet spot of utilization that leads people to feel that state of flow, that state of fulfillment. And on either side, burnout happens, both on both sides of being in that Goldilocks zone. All right. The second thing that is counterintuitive that leads to burnout, and this is, I think, based on the conversations that I've had with clients and others recently, is really counterintuitive, is that when you're understaffed, as you likely are right now, when the labor market is as tight as it is right now and it's harder to fill seats, I'm hearing from leaders that they are hanging on to underperformers because they need to have somebody, right? They don't want more work to fall on the parts of the team, the people on the team who are performing effectively, who are giving it their all, who are coming in on time, who are meeting their deadlines. And so they neither bring accountability into the conversations with people who are underperforming because they don't want to scare or push them out. And they're not ending the employment of people who are persistently and consistently underperforming because, again, they don't want the work to fall to the people who are bringing their all to the work. So there's this fear that if I either get rid of underperformers or potentially intimidate them out by requiring that they be accountable, then I'm going to add to the burden on the people who are performing, and thereby I'm going to burn out the people who are already performing. So the counterintuitive part of this is that by keeping around underperformers and not demanding from them that they do perform, very likely you're going to contribute to the burnout from the people who are performing, right? They maybe out loud, or maybe just in the privacy of their own thoughts, are thinking, why am I busting my ass while this person is being allowed to skate? It is a major contributor to burnout for people who love to perform, who love to bring their all, who enjoy challenging themselves and enjoy being challenged. But when they are surrounded by people who are not challenging themselves, are not performing, and are not being required to perform, that actually contributes to the burnout of the people you're trying to rescue from potential burnout by hanging on to people who are maybe, you believe, picking up some of the slack, even if they're not really meeting the requirements of the job. So you may be shooting yourself in the foot if you're thinking, I can't afford to get rid of this person, or I can't afford to bring accountability to the shore with this person because I can't afford for them to decide that they're going to quit rather than face the music of accountability. So that is the second and a very crucial way in which lots of people, in my experience right now, are making it harder to spare their most important employees from the hazards of burnout. They're in fact contributing to burnout by keeping underperformers around and by permitting those behaviors of underperformance. You get that sense. I'm surrounded by amateurs, right? When you hear that kind of trite expression, it's often not the amateurism, the lack of experience and knowledge, but it's the lack of professionalism and the lack of effort that makes people feel as though they are in the wrong surroundings, the wrong environment, and are feeling burned out. All right. Now, the last of the three suggestions that I want to make to you about how to prevent burnout. This one is perhaps a little bit less counterintuitive, so much as it is often underthought about. And that is a major contributor to burnout is a misalignment between expectations, between responsibilities, the results that I'm responsible for bringing, and the authority that I have to make the decisions or to expend the resources, the authority that I have to execute on, to bring those deliverables into action. So the most common place that I see this, the most egregious example that's clearest and easiest to understand, is in call centers, and we've all experienced the result of this misalignment between authority and responsibility. In many call centers, most call centers, the folks who answer the phone, these representatives are responsible, measured, their performance is measured against their ability to resolve the customer issue in a single phone call so the customer doesn't call back without escalating the call. In other words, without sending that call or without sending that customer to a supervisor, who are those supervisors, there are fewer and farther between, and so they're stretched thin, and it's harder and more expensive for the company to send any given caller to the supervisor. So they are, in essence, the reps are penalized for any time that they may escalate the call, which is why often you get pushback when you say, I'd like to speak to your supervisor. So the misalignment is that they have these responsibilities, ending the issue in a single call to the customer's satisfaction, right, in as little time as possible without escalating it, but they don't have the authority to make the decisions that will satisfy the customer's reason for calling. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They're supposed to end it on their own without escalating, and yet they can't make the decisions. You hear them say things like, our policy is this. Well, can I speak to your supervisor? My supervisor is going to tell you the same thing. And yet when I ask to speak to the supervisor, I often am able to get the supervisor to agree to do just what I asked, that supposedly doesn't conform to their policy, because the supervisor has the authority to countermand that policy in certain circumstances using their judgment. They haven't given the frontline people the authority to make those same decisions, and so they're measured against a standard that they cannot meet with the authority that they have, and nothing contributes to burnout more quickly than that. So my questions for you and the places where you can take action: do your people have the appropriate level of challenge in the work that they do on a day-to-day basis, where they're stretched beyond their capacity just that little bit, enough to make it interesting, enough to mean that they have to figure things out instead of just kind of going by rote? Do they have enough challenge that they have to lean in and apply themselves? If they don't have any challenge, then they're going to burn out from boredom. If they have too much challenge, I can't handle this, this is overwhelming, then they are going to burn out from stress and overwhelm. Are you at that sweet spot? Do you know the individual people who report to you, how they're doing in terms of that balance? Are you bringing to bear accountability so that people are either bringing their performance up to the standard of your company, or moving on out? Coaching, are you coaching people up or coaching them out, so that your best performers are surrounded by other strong performers, people with accountability, who do what they say they're going to do? And do your people all have the authority that they need in order to bring home the results that they're being asked to deliver? Those are my questions for you that will help you to diminish remarkably the impact of burnout on your people, and therefore the cost, the significant cost of burnout on your company. People who are burnt out do not stick around, and this is a time when you can't afford not to have your most important employees happy, thrilled, and fulfilled by the work that they're doing for you, for your company, for your customers. I'm Aaron Schmuckler with the Yes Works, where we are company culture no, we are not company culture ears. Rather, we are company culture engineers, helping you to make business good for work and work good for your people. So I got that wrong too. We're making work good for people and people good for work. That makes a whole lot more sense. And I thank you so much for sticking with me through what I hope has been a really valuable 15-minute conversation about preventing burnout.